Hello everyone, I'm Alyssa Moselle, and the topic that I will be covering in this presentation is sexual harassment in Canadian workplaces. So what is sexual harassment? Let's just run through a quick definition of what sexual harassment is, since the term can be used to refer to a wide range of actions. These actions can include verbal, nonverbal, and symbolic conduct, such as sexual taunts, slurs, gestures, and insulting, hostile, and degrading attitudes, according to Barling, Denisi, and Dupre. And sexual harassment can also include threats, comments about sex, or discriminatory remarks about someone's gender, according to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, which was cited by Canadian Women's Foundation. So prevalence, how prevalent is it? At least 25% of women in Canada have experienced inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. In fact, sexual violence, which includes sexual harassment, is the only violent crime in Canada that is not on a decline. And that's all according to the Government of Canada. So barriers to reporting and resolution. So the statistics I mentioned just a second ago may make you wonder why these numbers are so high and why the rates of sexual harassment aren't decreasing. The reason that these numbers aren't going down is that instances of sexual harassment are often not reported, and even if they are, these reports are not taken as serious complaints. So common barriers that victims face when trying to resolve issues of sexual harassment include: 1, the supervisor or manager did not take the complaint seriously. 2, the supervisor or manager did not initiate an investigation. And 3, the employee experienced retaliation from individuals in positions of authority, according to Employment and Social Development Canada. A reason for these barriers existing, and a barrier to reporting itself, is the normalization of sexual harassment through our patriarchal culture. This often causes both higher-ups and employees to not see sexual harassment as the issue that it is. Due to this, victims may not report sexual harassment as they see it as a normal occurrence of life, rather than a problem that needs to stop. In addition, higher-ups could view a report of sexual harassment as a tactic to destroy a man's career instead of what it is, a victim reaching out for support. Victim blaming is another huge barrier that will prevent victims from reporting sexual harassment. Victim blaming is so prevalent that 1 in 5 victims/survivors felt blamed by their perpetrator or their family and friends, according to the Government of Canada. If victim blaming is used effectively enough, the victim will turn the blame for the incidents of sexual harassment onto themselves. This will then make the victim feel as though they are deserving of the comments and harm that come from persistent sexual harassment. This allows the perpetrator and the entire system of patriarchy to be able to cover up the real causes and reasons for sexual harassment, because those who are targeted by victim blaming are less likely to seek help and report what happened, according to the Canadian Women's Foundation. Obviously, the reporting systems and supports put in place by companies are not helping to resolve issues of sexual harassment or prevent them in the first place, because these policies are not properly enforced due to the normalization of sexual harassment and the prevalence of victim blaming. So what about intersectionality? The Government of Canada states that LGBT plus people and Indigenous women are 3 times more likely to be sexually assaulted, and people with disabilities are 2 times as likely to be sexually assaulted. So in regards to barriers, the devaluation of all of these groups' intersectional identities would make it far less likely that they would be believed by authorities when reporting sexual harassment. Further, one can assume that LGBT plus people, Indigenous women, and or disabled people will be far more likely to face retribution or consequences for reporting any sexual violence, which includes sexual harassment, due to their intersectional identities being devalued and targeted far more than the identities of heterosexual white cis women. Because these identities are devalued through multiple means, the harm that is caused through sexual harassment is likely to be increased exponentially for them. So, the harms of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment can bring unwanted attention to certain aspects of a person's identity or body and be used to apply harmful stereotypes to a victim in order to break down their established sense of identity. Sexual harassment may not only impact personal identity and associated self-esteem, but given its tie to social identity, may also impact judgments about the value of one's gender and perceptions of how others evaluate this social group, according to Barling, Denisi, and Dupre. Repeated attacks of sexual harassment can only serve to chip away at a person's identity, dehumanize them, and leave them with lower self-esteem and self-confidence. The harms that directly impact victims in the workforce include poor mental health, loss of productivity or work performance, loss of wages or occupation, and burnout, which can have detrimental effects on well-being, such as increased stress levels, depersonalization, and lead to issues with staff retention, according to Abbott and Whitley. Based on these findings, the impact of sexual harassment causes harm to a victim far beyond just the dehumanization of their identity. It can actively push women out of workforces, contribute to the gender wage gap, and often hinders a woman's advancement in the workforce. So let's just kind of look at a little case study here with the Canadian Armed Forces. So the armed forces have been and continue to be a male-dominated workforce. Women in 2020 represented approximately 16% of the armed forces, according to the Canadian War Museum. Despite being a small demographic within the forces, 34% of women experienced at least one sexualized or discriminatory behavior compared to men's 16% in 2022. However, women were not the most targeted demographic in terms of sexual harassment and assault. Members of the armed forces who are not heterosexual were noticeably targeted more. And when it comes to reporting instances of sexual harassment, nearly 66% of people who reported typically face exclusion, bullying, or teasing from peers or other CAF members, being blamed or feeling further victimized, or negative impacts on their career, such as retaliation or reprisal. The high probability of retaliation or harm occurring is the main reason why 36% of survey participants did not report sexual harassment. And most of these numbers and statistics are from Statistics Canada, unless I otherwise mentioned. So what can we do about this? Evidently, Canada and its companies need to do better. The ineffectiveness of a company's reporting system leaves minoritized groups in Canadian workforces vulnerable to rampant and uncontrolled sexual harassment. These groups of people then have to face a declining quality of mental health and quality of life while working in incredibly harmful work environments without any proper support. And this can occur regardless of whether or not they choose to report incidents of sexual harassment. Further, these companies should be aiming to create prevention initiatives and programs alongside a strengthening of reporting and victim support services. Employment and Social Development Canada states that there is a need for additional human and financial resources to raise awareness, and 39% of respondents agreed that an awareness campaign would be useful. In addition, around half of respondents would like to see sexual harassment education for all employees and supervisors, as it would help them to feel safe and secure in their workplace, according to Employment and Social Development Canada. Further, consultations revealed that employers' training and education could lead to an improvement in employers' listening skills and increased capacity to understand what is happening in the workplace, according to Employment and Social Development Canada. And regardless of the situation, I think that is a great thing to happen. So based on these findings, proper education about sexual harassment could lead to employers being more sympathetic, understanding, and far less dismissive of reports of sexual harassment. The same goes for other employees that hear about or witness instances of sexual harassment. These more sympathetic and understanding employers, and committees can then create an environment where people feel safe and supported when reporting sexual harassment. Additionally, more effective and accurate training programs regarding sexual harassment in the workplace can be created, which will then lead to better and better reporting systems, punishments to hold perpetrators accountable, and supports for victims. Only when Canada and its companies do this will they move forwards towards eradicating sexual harassment in workplaces in Canada. And I'll just show you my references here quickly. Thank you for watching.